Hello, my name is Peter Cinnamon and you're very welcome to this. It's a podcast and it's all about the Irish League, where this week Linfield's European dreams once again came to a crushing end, beaten by Shelbourne as they ascend to the league phase of European competition, joined in tow by fellow League of Ireland side Shamrock Rovers. What can Linfield learn from this experience to avoid being the bridesmaids next time out? Back in league action, Glentoran and Carrick Rangers draw in East Belfast to continue their unbeaten starts to the season. Linfield get their first win of the campaign, beating Glenavon, and Bangor come back at Clandyboy to heap more misery on Rodney McAree and his Dungannon Swifts side. All that and more to talk through on this, your latest weekly edition of Kick and Match. Another week in the Irish League, delivering up results, news, surprises, disappointments, and we're going to look back on it all in the company of Stewart Cherry. Hello.
Hi, Peter. Great to be with you again. And obviously, congratulations on the start of your fourth season on Kicking Match. Is that right?
We are here indeed, fourth series, and so much has changed, yet so little has changed. And one of the things that haven't changed is your thirst for progression. You're here to rip it all up and change it all up, and it's one of the things that I really enjoy about chatting to you. And I think this has been one of those weeks where you've been sitting there pondering a lot, not just about the Irish League currently, about what it can be and could be moving forward.
I think I appreciate those words. I think where you say you enjoy speaking about it, I'm sure other people think that guy's all right pain in the backside. Maybe spouting off the same stuff. But no, look, I think it's I've really enjoyed listening to the shows you've had over the last couple of weeks, as I would do any week. And I think having these discussions about where the league was, is, and could be, not will be, but could be, is really interesting. And I was sort of pondering about this since really the summertime. I actually think in many ways this could be a generation-defining season in the Irish League for a number of reasons, both on and off the field, because I think we have got to that crossroads now whereby the stadium funding, there's a potential that could be announced, or the next part of it could be announced in the next 4 weeks. You've got the league restructure. You've got the surveys that are going out. You have got the sense that if we're going to do something, we need to do something. And if we're not going to do something, it's, well, how do we improve with what we have? And I think Linfield's performances, the good and the bad, have shone a spotlight on it. And I think the fact the European journey is over for Irish League this season again, I think shines a light on that too. So yeah, I think it really could be, and in many ways, I really hope that it is a pivotal season, or a pivotal 9 months for Irish League, because I think at some point in time we can't keep talking. We've got to start doing, and unfortunately, I think there's been not enough do.
For those who, and this is not going to be a full podcast about changing the Irish League, but for those who feel as though we have made progression and that trying to rip up what we know and what we have does not automatically mean progress, what do you say to them that feel frustrated that perhaps there's other things that could be focused on that isn't just simply playing more games in July or on Sundays or whatever?
100%. I mean, there's a list as long as your arm about the things that we could do and how we could improve things. Like, there's absolutely there's no end to the list that you could have. I mean, how do you get better pitches? How do you get better facilities? How do you improve the standard of coaching? How do you improve the standard of player development? How do you make the games more affordable after the prices went up at the start of last season? How do you improve the refereeing? How do you improve the coverage? There's an endless supply of what we need to do in the Irish League. But I think people who bemoan the fact that, oh God, are we having this conversation again? Well, what do you want to change? Or what do you think needs to improve? And again, you hear a lot of the naysayers. I think Mark brought it up last week, and you, Mark, talked about the part-time, full-time games on Friday nights and everything. But yeah, I just think it's been really interesting start to the season on the pitch. But I do think behind the scenes there will be invariably big moves that people want to make off the field.
This all somewhat stands. We're getting ahead of ourselves from the Linfield result against Shelbourne. I do appreciate that people do not think that is a relative mirror to compare ourselves to in the League of Ireland, and the history making week that they have had, and really the history making decade that they have had. What's the stat out there? The first team outside of the top 30 in Europe, league wise, to have more than one club in Europe. Of course, this is all an anomaly, slightly. Well, it is for now, but the Europa Conference League obviously has extended it, and that's what's given access here. But two teams, obviously at the expense of Linfield, who once again failed at the final hurdle. I think what really sticks in the craw there is that they had 4 bites of the cherry against Shelbourne, and they conceded in all games. They don't win a single one of them. And when it mattered most, and they had the most experience of them, you'd think they'd be the most savvy, they'd be most prepared. That game was over, as many people predicted very early on at Windsor Park. And it got a few people down. Not that Linfield should really define the overall league and what it is moving forward, and we could get caught up in how what the team is and what matters and players and how they're set up and managers and all that type of stuff. But it comes down to the question: can the Irish League even come close to what the League of Ireland is, and what does it take to get closer to it? Because that was a bumpy road these past 2.5 decades. Many teams folded, many teams were in the wilderness, a lot of disappointment for fans, and here we now see what looks like relative stability, real progression. How do we steal their success, copy their secrets?
But I think you're absolutely right, and I certainly hope for any of the listeners who are match going season ticket holders who follow their clubs week in, week out, and are the absolute life blood of the Irish League, and they're looking at some exile who hasn't lived at home for years. And I go to the games as and when I can. I'll be going, I try to get 5 or 6 games in every season, and I understand that my views could and probably maybe should be dismissed, as an observer, and I absolutely take that. But I care deeply and passionately about a sport, and about the Irish League. But I agree with you. I think that I read David Jeffrey's article, and there's actually a couple of really good articles in the Belfast Telegraph this week. Stuart McKinley did a really good one. Keith Bailey did a good one, and then obviously DJ. And he says, "Oh, we can't compare ourselves to the League of Ireland." Okay, right. My first question is why? Because if we're going based off, say, size, someone says, "Oh, we can't compare it because they're 3 times the size." All right, cool. Let's take that argument. Countries that are smaller than Northern Ireland in terms of population, that are higher up the food chain in terms of European football: Cyprus, Malta, Faroe Isles, Iceland, and I think Kosovo are probably similar population to us. We are 33 times bigger than Faroe Isles, and they're 40th. Okay, we're 6 times bigger than Iceland, and they're 32nd. So someone could turn around and say, "Oh, well, they've invested all this money. Great. Well, why can't we do that?" You can't make that excuse, because in one sense, it's not just the Republic of Ireland, which is a bigger country and our nearest country, that are doing better than us. There's a number of countries around Europe that are smaller than us that are doing better than us, and we need to understand why. Countries that are of a similar size to us, Macedonia, Latvia, Lithuania, they are ahead of us. And you say, you look at where the League of Ireland is right now, they've got 2 teams, and so they have got the same number of teams that are competing in the league phase as Sweden, Denmark, Norway, and Croatia. That is the level that they are operating at right now. And you're right, they've had a bumpy last decade, or 2.5 decades. Okay, but for me, there's no point burying our heads in the sand. They say the Republic of Ireland is a bigger country. Sure it is. But percentage of the population that would play Gaelic football in the Republic of Ireland is far bigger than what it is in Northern Ireland, for obvious demographic reasons. Okay, rugby is obviously a hugely played sport down there. But what they have done is that they have shown intent to get better. They have aspirations and they've earned it. And what they've achieved in the past week, with Shamrock Rovers and Shelbourne, and before that, Shamrock Rovers and Dundalk qualifying and having two teams qualifying, they are doing this with Republic of Ireland born and raised and developed coaches. Okay. They have done this in the League of Ireland despite the neglect that the FAI has put into them. And you ask any League of Ireland fan or a fan of any League of Ireland club, they will have the same grievances and gripes about the FAI as any Irish League club does with the IFA. But they have they have got a thriving match day experience. They have a thriving fan culture. They have kicked on from COVID, as we've discussed in previous things. But I think it's more about their attitude. Yeah, you're right. Some clubs have gone to the wayside and they've come back. And still some clubs dice with the financial issues. Dundalk, Cork, sort of yo-yoed. But I think when all's said and done, they had a goal to be bigger and better than where they are at. And they've put the trial and effort and the time and energy into achieving that. And that's what they've got. And they've got their just deserves. I personally think the Irish League is getting what it deserves at the moment in terms of success on the European field, which is not much. 18 matches this season we've played across the four teams. We had 3 wins, 8 draws and 7 defeats. 18 matches, we have 3 wins.
But we are a small league in a relatively small country, and what we might now see from the League of Ireland is that there could be a trickle-down effect, which maybe the league could benefit from, in that, in the same way people were talking up maybe the Championship being the best that level of football in this country's been for a long time. That's because there was more players flooding in. And yes, oftentimes and even recently, it's more of the older players who are moving across. You're thinking of Hubin and the McElhennys and the likes there. It still is a part of the natural progression of the league. You're seeing young players moving on. How will that money be invested? I think we saw with Larne, they pushed other teams to try and be better, try and be bolder, try and maybe improve the way they do youth setup, training. We still don't fully know, with the hindsight of history, of how sustainable the Larne project will be. But they have made money through Europe, and it's not all about Europe, because to be honest, if you're a fan of Carrick, Dungannon, Glenavon, Portadown, whatever, really, that doesn't concern you.
Not at all.
It's really, they aspire to be there, but also feel as though perhaps unless they see some sort of investment come their way, it just looks far out of it.
But Peter, they could benefit from it. The trickle down effect. The money that came into the Irish League this season, or last season, through to the those payments that UEFA give out. The better Irish League clubs do in Europe, the more money that is then available for Irish League clubs in general. And you're right. You could turn around and say, well, look, that's no interest to us. Cool. Well, then don't apply for European license. Right? You've got to. Linfield are really interesting because they do some brilliant work on the youth side. I think Matthew Orr's away now to Nottingham Forest. Another fantastic product at a really fantastic youth setup that they have there. And you point on Larne. Larne are the trailblazers of the Irish League in Europe, and they have been for the last sort of 5-6 years. This season, 6 matches, no wins, 5 draws and 1 loss. And they lost 3-0 to Santa Clara at home, or in Ballymena, and then you see Shamrock Rovers overcome them, and that's probably the difference, of where we're at in that relation between the two. Dungannon Swifts, brilliant away victory in against Vaduz, and then obviously lost at home. Cliftonville, a draw away, and then a bad defeat at home. But my point, I was looking at this, Peter, looking at those stats, the difference between us turning those 8 draws into, say, 4 more wins. It's such fine margins. And what's cost Irish League clubs in Europe this season per discipline? These are 5 or 6 red cards. I think Cliftonville had red cards in both their matches. Dungannon had a red card, Linfield had a red card, and Larne have had red cards. that ill discipline. Now, why is there ill discipline? Maybe not used to playing clubs at that level. Sure, could come into it. Is it the fitness, the sharpness, the conditioning, both mentally and physically? Is it just that maybe our players just were early set up, or you just reckless? But 5 or 6 red cards across 18 matches is quite a lot. But there's different things you can get into. But I think for me, while the results in Europe this season weren't what we wanted them to be, and we probably didn't get enough wins off those 18 matches, where my optimism is kicking in is I don't think we're that far away. I really don't. I think there's games that we should be beating teams from Gibraltar. We should be. And look, hey, they're a micro state that a lot of money's been thrown into it, and basically they're not Gibraltar players in these clubs. It's basically Spanish players that are moving to these clubs and probably big wages. Sure. Okay. Same with Andorra. I get that. But there were chances for every single Irish League club playing in Europe this season to progress through at least one round. And the difference that makes in terms of the money coming into the league, I think it goes from 250k to 400k to 600k to 800k to a mil, right? Linfield have made, I think, 1.2, 1.3 million. Larne have made just under a million. Dungannon have made 500k, and Clifton made 250. If you get through one round, 2 rounds, the difference that can have, as you said, with Larne and how they've invested it, reinvested it. But that for me is where I'm not saying everything's terrible and we need to rip up the script. But what I am saying is there are countries out there of a similar size. Slovenia is a similar size to us. Iceland, as I mentioned, is a lot smaller than us, that are doing these things better than what we are. So for me, it's who is the template? Who is the case study? Who is the example that we are aspiring to be like? And let's be open about it. Let's look to see what they've done well and where they've made mistakes. Let's take that 25 years it's taken the League of Ireland and cut that in half, cut that down to 10 years.
Well, if we're to talk about the team that had the chance to get into Europe, Linfield, what did they not do well? The answer is probably a lot, but it might be not that surprising to some people, but there was a lot of irate Linfield fans, frustrated with the setup, perhaps realising that this is a team that doesn't have much of an attacking second gear, and especially after the first goal, they looked petrified. And outside of that spark which Offord gave them through just pure determination and pure energy, they just didn't look like they had the passing ability, the fitness, everything. It looked so far off, and it will obviously look a lot different if Linfield don't win the league this year. This would be a sign that perhaps Cooper and the way they've reinvested money or invested money hasn't really led them to being the team that they need to be. But we know this Linfield team for the past few years have been on the conservative end. And you've got to say it bit them.
Yeah, I think it did. I think it did. And it's a I don't know, like you throw this out. So where do Linfield want to be, right? So the pressure that David Healy has managed domestically for Linfield, I think, since he took over, nearly 10 years ago, I think he's done an incredible job in that regard. Was he 6 or 7 Irish League titles? He's won a couple of doubles. Last season, he won the league at an absolute canter, 20 plus points. I can maybe count on at least 2 occasions that he's won the league with, quote, the worst Linfield team we've seen in a generation. He has taken off challenges, title race challenges from Coleraine, from Ballymena, from Cliftonville, from Glentoran, and from Larne, right, when he's won titles. But I would think maybe with him, there's potentially 2 schools of thought. His domestic dominance and then his European agony, right? Because when push comes to shove, he has failed to achieve the objective in Europe. That's failed. He's gotten to 3 playoff finals, but they've lost. And I think this happened on Thursday. They were unlucky because Shelbourne were probably one of the best placed teams in that. To play them again, I find was quite crazy. That was very unlucky. If they played one of the other sides, it might have fancied their chances. But
yeah, and maybe Larne were lucky they got through they got a gimme round, didn't they? If people forget.
Yeah, they did.
And then they get Gibraltar in opposition, which they almost wrecked themselves
They do,
at home via red card for Cookie Gallagher. So
but they've gone. But that being said, in their European campaigns, Lauren have gone to Wales and won. They've gone to Denmark and won. They have gone to Portugal on at least two occasions, or Portugal they've drawn. They've gone to tough places and they've picked up results. So, but you're right, they did give me a gimme, but they did have a gimme. But I felt looking at Linfield in all four games against Shelbourne. Now in the first leg of the playoff, 2-0 down, the obviously Fitzpatrick gets sent off. It was a stupid challenge, harsh red, but maybe second glances, I think, as you guys talked about last week, probably the right outcome. They get back in it with Offord and then they miss the penalty. Like, imagine they had 2-2 then go into the game. But the reality is, in all four games, they were outclassed, they were outfought, they were outmuscled. I think Chelsea looked really good in the fourth match. But my question would be, for Linfield to achieve what they want to achieve in Europe, which I do think is their goal, is it time to bring in a manager that has achieved that? Is it time to bring in a coach who has led a club of a similar stature to the group phases, be that Europa League or the Conference League? Because unfortunately, and I mean this actually as an Irish League fan, I do think it's unfortunate that David Healy hasn't done it, as I would have loved to see him do it, because I idolised him as a player. But Linfield have lost lost matches, the clubs and rounds from the Faroe Isles, from Malta, Lithuania, and the Republic, obviously similar sized places, with Lithuania and the Republic, and they've lost to clubs from Malta and Faroe Isles. And I just wonder, is his time? Is he the man to bring Linfield into the group stages? I'm beginning to think that he's maybe not.
Well, let's reflect outside of the people tweeting out Healy out, right? Which I think many a Linfield fan would say is massively over the top. There is other cohorts who would say to me, and I've said privately, look, you can't deny the success that Healy's had, but they are starting to feel a malaise, a frustration, that they know his playbook, they know the type of manager he is, they have been here before, and they just don't see him from a signings point of view. And we don't know if it's being limited when it comes to signings. Don't know his budget. We don't know his scouting team. But they view him as someone who is quite cautious. And I actually think Linfield, you look at their strength, it should be at the back. It didn't shine on Thursday there. But you can see, I think, the quality's there. As you move up the pitch, there is sparks, but there isn't a real excitement. And winning a league boringly is... Glentoran are exciting, but they're not successful. And maybe that's just this is the way they've made the bed, and this is the thing that comes with it. If you're a team that's poor at the back but has all this random erratic flair up top, you'll be frustrated when you lose 5-0 because against a really good team, because you're not savvy enough at the back. When Linfield are sitting there without much of a clue and don't feel like they have the pace or the passing ability or the shape, fans will go, I wish we had someone that was a bit more exciting. The question is, Healy has flirted with going before,
yeah,
and it doesn't feel like he's very close to leaving at the minute. But after this season, is there one roll that, like, is it worth one more roll of the dice? There's older players in this Linfield side, and Shields and Miller and
Mulgrew.
Yeah, and you can see them being replaced. Look, it looks as though Josh Archer is going to be a nailed-on starter for them this year. Isaac Bird is a money signing that's been brought in, as in a fee's been spent. A young player, but none of these guys have, and no one's Joel Cooper.
No,
but we saw what the likes of Coote did against Linfield. We saw what the big forward did against their back line. Offord has been the exciting attacking threat, and I Linfield fans will probably go, we've got a good squad. And maybe these players have got signed, Braden Graham, Keith O'Neill, all this type of stuff, but they're probably thinking, why do we not have more exciting players in our team? Because they're successful but not exciting. Like I said, if Linfield don't win the league, it'll be because of the lack of dynamism up front.
Yeah.
And that was what we saw. lack of dynamism, and as soon as the goals went in, they were more. I think that's also more frustrating. They got more conservative.
Yeah,
They tried to get this low block to kind of deal with these balls in, and Shells were just passing it around them.
yeah, it was difficult. But again, this is the funny thing too. It's like I think push comes to shove, Shelbourne were just a better club over the better team over the four matches that they played, right?
Yes, I'm
Yeah,
not going to say Cliftonville are going to be able to do that to
no,
them,
no, no.
Bangor, whatever,
But
right?
they were. But the problem is, it's that Shelbourne are what, fifth or sixth in the league down south this season. They haven't had the best title defense, and that's a slightly worrying thing for me. In that they're both full time, and I know Linfield are sort of maybe newer to full time than some of the other clubs around Europe. And yes, look, the reality is on a European side, um, Irish league clubs are going to be at a disadvantage because the fact that Northern Ireland is now not part of the EU means that we are going to be limited from a work permit perspective to players primarily who've got British and Irish passports. That's the reality. We can't do what clubs in Latvia are doing or what clubs in Macedonia are doing or other countries where they are able to bring in players from West Africa, from South America, from other parts of Europe to come play for us. We are very much restricted at the moment due to the profile player we can bring in, and that does impact it.
Yeah, you're right. That is why sometimes you look at RFS and think, where have they got these Brazilians from?
Yeah,
Because it's an easier route to that. Now, your nationality does not define quality, but you're right. There is not the same kind of pool that you can
that's it.
pick from there. Now, you would say that Northern Ireland is beside one of the biggest player pools in Europe with England, Scotland, and Wales, but it's not seen as attractive, and people are still coming. So it's another year. Linfield move on. That they made their signings in January. They're out. We'll stop the comparisons to the League of Ireland. It's now back to Porridge, and it's now back to winning the league. What we saw in the week before the game with Shelbourne was that one of the big clashes we expect to be a significant game in the title race, Corey and Linfield, was set to be penciled in for Sunday,
Yeah.
was moved at the request of Linfield.
Mm.
I got people privately saying to me, "No, I don't think there's anything that they have done wrong in
Mm.
the sense of the rules are there, they made their call, but I'll let you comment on this because plenty of people said it there was a spirit of the league that Linfield have the right to move that game, but a lot of people didn't like it.
Yeah, it's really difficult. Look, the Linfield played a game against Cliftonville on the after the first leg, right? And you would wonder, was that the smartest move to make? They had already quite a few games under their on in their legs at this point. I think they maybe close to 8 to 10 matches. And then they played the game against Cliftonville, and they don't play it against Coleraine. It has denied us of a probably 3,000 or 3,500 sellout. It's denied us the champions versus the challengers cup against the Blues again, and probably a hell of an occasion. I also think with the BBC cameras scheduled to be there too. I think it might have been our live game of the weekend. So yeah, it is disappointing. Look, I do think if it's in their right to do it, and I'm going to be
Which it was.
then
And Lauren moved a lot of games
yeah,
last year.
and then
Now they
you yeah,
didn't move their game after Europe was done.
yeah. Look, I think if Linfield are in the rights to do it, clubs are able to exercise their rights to do it in the same way. And then you guys talked about it, I think, which was great. The idea of a Friday. If a club has the ability to play a game on a Friday, they should be able to do it. Um, and um, and that's it. But other people will hold up a view that clubs shouldn't be forced to play games on Sunday. I have my own views on that, which I wouldn't necessarily agree with. The view that you shouldn't say, "Oh, I don't want to play on a Sunday, therefore we're not going to," because I think that's equally as you know restricted to the growth of the league. But that's neither here nor there. But I think if Linfield were in the rights to do it, sure, do it. I just hope that game can be played again, maybe on a free weekend at some point, because I think the occasion itself would be a great one. And I think it probably denied us undoubtedly the biggest game of the weekend.
We will repeat, totally within the rules. They made the call. It was moved. And I know they had the games on the Tuesday. I'm just reiterating a sentiment that was expressed to me, both publicly and privately, that they could have played the game and looked at other games being moved and pulled back. But it hasn't, and we'll move on and we'll see if that will be to their benefit or not.
Shows a fear though, Peter, though. I think if that was Carrick away, would they have cancelled it?
Well, they didn't after RFS and they lost it. Did they not
Yeah.
have?
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, they did, didn't they? I mean, sorry, I'll rephrase this. And actually, probably Carrick's the wrong. Is the
Well,
actually
maybe
wrong
it's
example?
not. Maybe it's not.
Yeah, yeah. But again, put it this way: if it was from a bottom six team, and sorry, I apologize, I'll retract the comment about Carrick, especially if they're one of like four unbeaten sides in the league so far this year. But again, if it was against a lower ranked team, would they have cancelled that game? I'm not sure. I think it was maybe more of a an opportune time, maybe not to give O'Rian a good shot at them, maybe with tired legs and tired heads after the defeat.
You
So
know what?
yeah, they made the call.
It's
So
it's
yeah,
not easy winning the league, and you can use all of the facets that are at your disposal. With that being the Linfield game, we don't have a Korean game to talk about, but we should talk about this Carrick side. I somewhat raised the alarm, hardly original, last week when I said this team look good, this team look well organised, they look hard to beat. They are not trying to beat you, they are trying to make sure you can't beat them. How long will it last? Because I think it very much depends on personnel. We'll have to find out. But look at what they did at Glentoran. Low block, you try and take it on, try and sneak through us. Glentoran did eventually get their goal, but they huffed and puffed and struggled throughout the game to try and get a second, which they failed to do. It's a big, meaty, it's so old school. It makes the game just seem so primitive. But, I mean, let's not complicate it here. It's about physicality, it's about athleticism, and they will have 5, 6, 8 men at the back, but they have the ability to break through because they have Gibson, because they have Heatley. And as you push men forward, they look to exploit that. They have a game plan. It might not be pretty. It might not be tiki-taka. It might not be, false sixes and double nines or whatever. But they are undefeated. And outside a nice bit of work from Jordan Stewart, that could have went anywhere. I think that nice ball came in. They were trying that the whole game. I think what we're seeing here is, as long as personnel are there, Carrick are likely to not lose more than they will lose.
I was listening to the game at the weekend. It was I think it was the main game that was covered on Sports Sound, and it did seem to be a game of relatively few chances in the first half. I think Glentoran probably put the foot down a bit in the second half, and probably will feel aggrieved. I think they certainly will feel aggrieved that that's 2 points dropped for them. But the route one, get it done mentality. If you look at what Carrick's goal, I mean, the finish itself from Heatley, good lord, it was such a sublime finish. They all just sort of rolled in, but it was just perfectly executed. That came a long ball out of defence, and Heatley at whatever age he is now, in his late 30s, who had retired. Isn't that right? He had actually retired, and he's come back and he's haunted the Glens. Not for the first time. I think the Glens got a deserved equaliser. There's a really, really good ball, really smart play from Kane right in the stroke of half time. He put the ball into the danger area. Really good run from Jordan Stewart, and really, really smart finish. And I think he's got his season up and running well for the Glens. That was maybe a second or third goal. But again, he needs that as his rehabilitation with the Glens faithful. Will continue. But if he keeps doing that, I think all will be forgotten pretty quickly. First time Glens have conceded this season. They're 7-4-1 against. I think what Carrick. With Luke McCullough, at the back there, they've brought in, like very, very experienced Irish League players. Is Billy Joe Burns there now too? They've got Snoddy in, and they've to do that. I think Luke McCullough wanted a big game, obviously, after his 4 or 5 seasons at the Oval. But Baxter's team, the idea for Carrick is they all want to stay up this season, and the reality is to stay up, you want to get points on the board early, and it's crazy. 4 matches in for them and 5 in for Glenavon and Dungannon. Carrick have got a 10-point lead on the 2 sides that are rooted to the bottom of the Premiership table, and that's massive for them. And I think Carrick will be thinking, let's get as many points on the board as we possibly can between now and Halloween, and then from Halloween to Christmas. Because the reality is, it is an older squad. It is an older starting 11. And as the season goes on, wear and tear will kick in, fitness will kick in, sharpness will kick in. So for Carrick, I think, and Batcher knows this himself, master tactician, he's been, one of the greatest Irish League managers in history. But he will see this as just get the points on board as quickly as you can.
I say, and I'm the one bringing up the idea of fitness, and obviously this is a team that can be broken down as the way they are. They're hardly totally impenetrable. They almost have enough wins here that they'll go against anybody and just say, we're ready for 0-0 here, and we have enough. We'll use our chances if they come through, because that's what Glens were stuck with doing. They would get the ball halfway into the opposition half, and you would be seeing two lines, almost 10 men behind the ball, and they're like, go for it, Luke McCulloch has that physicality. Keller has that. Jack Scott has that physicality, and it's different when they're having to come from behind. They've got these wins. They've already got double the amount of wins away from home, which they got last year. They go to a team who hadn't conceded a goal, 4 wins on the bounce, and they take a valuable point. And I just think what we've seen recently with the relegation side of things is that teams are struggling to get anything. And I think Carrick are just going to chip away. And even if they're maybe not beating the Glenavons, Portadowns, Bangors, I just don't think they're going to lose. And
it's going to be hard to beat. They'll definitely be hard to beat, Peter.
But that's all they need to be
totally.
Right now. They just need to be hard to beat, and they will of course lose some games. They'll draw probably plenty, but they will also then sneak a wee win against a Cliftonville. As we saw, there'll be crazy games against the Crews. It's just highly impressive, and I don't want to completely take them out of the relegation discussion just yet, because that's way over the top. But the way they're set up, they really, and they've already got so many more points. Like, what have they got on? So we have Glenavon and Dungannon bottom, 0 points.
Yeah.
Carrick have 10 points.
10 points, yeah.
So at the end of this month, Carrick could lose all their games, and Glenavon and Dungannon could try to win all theirs, and they may find it difficult to overtake them in a month. That is, at that part of the table, that is a long way to go. So congratulations to Carrick. You have proven everybody wrong. Talk of them being this year's Dungannon, I just don't see it. But the art is completely different in the setup. But where wins are hard to come by, they've got 3 of them, and we're yet to see them do their thing at home.
And it's 3 big wins. Big win against Crusaders, a massive win against Glenavon, and then, as you say, a massive win against Dungannon, and that's a big point. But with Gibson up top, I still think Gibson's one of those players that would do such a good job for the Glens, because he scores goals. He okay, maybe he needs to be the main man, but it's just, if you even look at Glentoran right now, who've had a really solid start to the season, 5 matches, 13 points. They will be, if you offered the Glens that at the start of the season, they'd be bloody delighted. But the problem is on that left hand column, goals for 5 matches, 7 goals, and this is the problem with Glens. Where are the Glens? Who is going to score 20, 25 goals for the Glens this season in the Irish League? And then if you don't have that 20, 25 goal scorer, who are your 3 or 4 players that are going to chip in between 10 and 15 goals each? Right? And that, for me, is the thing. Like Glens last season, I think they only scored 16 goals at home before the split, in their 16 or 17 matches. And their form this season is continuing of a similar ilk. Now, Paddy Hoban, I think he's come in from Derry, could be that guy. But you made a comment earlier on about the Irish League is now an attractive place for veterans or experienced League of Ireland players. or junior League of Ireland players who don't make the grade for the Premier Division clubs. But I think if Glens can get that right, they will be a threat this season. But I think until they get that right, I think their threat will probably be curtailed at some point.
I think ultimately the games they've played, that's an excellent set of results. What one goal conceded, I think they can build on it from there. They would love to be sitting there with 15 points, but as long as they're up and close and look relatively safe for Europe, that's what they want. And I think they'll improve. That will come from both personnel, the likes of Thompson really been able to take this team by the scruff of the neck. We have a couple of players who I really like, as you mentioned. Jordan Stewart's the man who's really starting to show his first bit of form in many years. He had moments for Cruise, but never sustained. The Blues in the past maybe 2-3 years, he was either always injured or wasn't always starting. So I wouldn't get too panicked up in East Belfast at all. What could have been, they have not been playing against the absolute stoutest of opposition that this league has to offer, but they will come. And it's to be up where they are, still undefeated, is great. We can then move really to the other side of the table, and those two teams I referenced, Glenavon and Dungannon, horror show. They've scored 4 goals between them in 10 games. What's more worrying for the Swifts is that Glenavon have had a bit of a murderer's row in the teams that they've had to face. They go away to Cliftonville. They do have to play against some of the best teams. Dungannon had a bit of that. They've had to do Coleraine away and Linfield away, but a loss to Bangor, not good. Losing at home to Carrick, they are on the wrong side of a defeat against Portadown, who are likely to be in their close vicinity. The way this league's work, you get plenty more bites of the cherry against them, but that's 6 points the likes of Portadown and Bangor have on both those sides. And Bangor are somewhat puffing out their chests and saying, hey, everybody doubted us, look at us getting another win. And it's important. I think 6 points out of 5 is way above what I expected them to get, but they were always going to be frisky, so that they'll keep going on as the weeks happen. Like it's weird. It's almost not an insult, but there's two ways of looking at this. It's bigging up, well done Bangor, but also reflecting on this is a Dungannon team devoid of confidence. Rodney's threatening players, if you don't want to be here, out you go. That doesn't sound like a particularly harmonious dressing room. We see Brandon Birmingham move to Cliftonville on loan. Strange one there. That's one of those perhaps suits both parties. The thing for Dungannon was maybe they had those tough games. They get caught in both those games against Portadown and Carrick, but they get their first goal from open play. A couple of players return to the first team. Andy Mitchell being one of them. He scores his goal, but it all falls apart. That's the concerning thing, is that they had the lead in their hands and then they let it fall away, and the window seems to have shut, and the area which is the one which is the most concerning, whoever their centre backs are, doesn't seem to have been addressed or hasn't been able to be addressed. So it's up to Rodney and that team to try and fix that. But if you're leaking goals and you're not scoring them, which so far out of 5 they've only got 1 from open play, it's a recipe for disaster. I don't think relegation battling is that just yet, because they've got so much of the squad that got them to where they were last year. But week by week, they need to get points quick.
They really, really do. I mean, massive game coming up. The next game is away to Glenavon, this is the problem. Even at the start of the season, a great start isn't going to mean that you're going to be, qualifying for Europe or winning a title, but nor does a bad start mean that you're going to necessarily get relegated. But if you don't start getting points on the board, it can make things bloody difficult. And this is the problem where Dungannon are at the moment. If you even take Obviously, they had a brilliant 1-0 victory away. But then since then, they lost 3-0 at home to Vaduz, 3-0 away to Linfield, 4-1 to Portadown, 2-0 to Coleraine, 2-0 to Carrick, and then obviously 2-1 at the weekend. I haven't gone a goal up. And it was good to see Andy Mitchell. He took the goal well. I think the keeper probably should have done better. It looked a bit of a softer header, or certainly a savable header. But the problem is there's no momentum there. What is that? 6 defeats in a row if you count the European match. And they've scored like 2 goals in those 6 games. Like it's a big, that's a big switch you've got to make. And the reality is, like last year, they were the surprise team because they got into the top 6 and played some scintillating football and won the Irish Cup. They're, to me, the surprise team in the Irish League so far this year, in that how off the pace they have looked. The news in John McGovern is, and you touched on it last week and the week before, it is massive because he's one of the best players in the Irish League. And I was almost very surprised that he went to Dungannon and that they had him. And the loss of him will be massive. People will work them out, absolutely. But if you go away to a newly promoted side such as Bangor, who in theory are a team that I think you guys did the preview at the start of the season. I mean, how many of the 3 of you had Bangor being relegated? 2, right? Mm-hmm. That's a massive, massive victory for Bangor. And Arthur's, who will score goals in this league, is a big, strong player, a bit like Jordan Owens. In a way, he's that sort of ilk, that stature. It's a huge victory for them. And I do think that's a bit of a crushing defeat for Dungannon. And I didn't actually hear Rodney saying that, but that's, if he's making those comments after 5 domestic matches, someone could say, was that just a timely bit up the backside? Might be. Or is that potential, the first little glimpses of panic seeping in? Now, Rodney McRae is a fantastic head coach. He's a fantastic manager, and he will get this right. But if you look at their fixtures coming up, they've got Glenavon next, then Crusaders, then Cliftonville, then Ballymena United. Those are all tough games, and they need to be seeing probably 6 or 7 points out of those next 4 matches to kickstart their season. And there's no guarantees.
We saw in previous years that Portadown in the end never had to worry about relegation last year. They were 7th, but Newry and Loughgall came in, used that momentum from the previous season to their advantage. Other teams above them are maybe more in flux, squad moving on, bringing in new players. But what we saw is that while those teams took advantage early in the season, as the teams above them who perhaps have more quality went through the gears, found their footing, they were able to find a way to push these other teams to the side. So they needed that point space. It's more Dungannon's hope were to be top 6, and now it's just getting away from the danger zone first, and then it's just really, it's a hole in their bucket is the problem, and that can just be very frustrating for any football project. It can always happen to anybody, but it when everything looked like they were in a position to take 1 step back and hopefully maybe 2 steps forward, it's 2 steps back, and I'm yet to see any sort of step forward. For Glenavon, they've had hard games. They've struggled. There's been difficult decisions go their way, like in the Coleraine game last week. That red card wasn't overturned, which suggests to me that there's maybe something we don't know, or I don't know. Anyway, not overturned. Eyesight says that's confusing, but look, we don't have the full report there. They go to Cliftonville and they lose. It's all good to be the we tried hard and came close team, but this is a results business, and that first goal in particular, mistakes, and poor team cohesion seems to be the issue at Glenavon.
Yeah, it's difficult. I rate Rodney McRae very highly, but Paddy McLaughlin, equally so. I think Paddy McLaughlin's a fantastic coach, and I was very surprised he actually was out of football for as long as he was after leaving the assistant manager role at Derry. Yes, it's been really tough for Glenavon. I was looking at even just following them a bit during pre-season. I'm pretty sure, if I'm just checking there now, like the pre-season results, like they lost 3-0 to the Welders right before the start of the season.
They were rubbish in pre-season. They've got a few new names in, but will they settle? Lombardo looks to find somewhat of his footing.
Yeah, good header. I guess. But they're just getting exposed, and this is the problem. If like Paddy, when did Paddy take over? Was it January?
About November last year.
November last year. So right, okay, cool. So he's had maybe 9 months to bed in his ideas plus a pre-season. Um, and they seem to have had quite a lot of comings and goings, a lot of players in, some players out. Obviously, they're going to Linfield in that way. Saying he didn't want to play for the club anymore, never a good sign. Coupled with the fact you haven't had a good start to the season, not ideal. And obviously, when it doesn't rain, it pours. When you think of the red card decision, which I did, I mean, on watched it back on replay numerous times. Obviously, didn't have the advantage that the referee had, but it does seem very, very surprising that that's not been overturned. So they're going to miss him for what, 3 matches, and I think he showed on Saturday. Just he's a big, strong boy, and he took his goal well. But they are going to get punished, and this is just what's going to happen, Peter. And it's where Paddy is going to earn his stripes now. Is how do the players respond to that? It is a early season 6-pointer against the Swifts next weekend. Um, but they've got to cut out the silly mistakes. And this is why it's actually going to be a really interesting game, because what Dungannon have conceded 13 goals, Glenavon have conceded 10 already. So leaky defences that are getting punished and making silly mistakes. Liftable, aren't setting the world on fire, but they seem to dispatch Glenavon relatively easily on Saturday, and that's a concern. You know, but it is a concerning start to the season when you lose 5 games. Like, where's your momentum going to come from, and how do you stop the how do you stop that flow and build your momentum? And that's just what they've got to do. Glenavon's next few games, Dungannon, then Lauren away, then Linfield away, then Crusaders at home. Again, no gimmies there at all. But the only thing I would say about Glenavon is that they haven't been blown away this season yet. They haven't been absolutely hammered out of sight. Only lost by a goal to Coleraine, only a goal to Carrick. But, they need something, and they need something quickly. And I hope for Paddy's sake they can get it. Because it could be a long, long, long season if they don't.
It's one of those games on Saturday that whoever doesn't win it, and obviously both of them could not win it with a draw, it makes everything feel a lot less fun. And it's probably a way you could have described that game on Friday night between Portadown and Crusaders. Whoever lost it, the start of their season was going to be defined as not good.
Yeah.
Portadown, the home team, were able to do it, but watching back the highlights, it looks as though Crusaders look to be the brighter team. But it's all about results. Ports took their chances very well. Nice goal from Rhys there.
Took it really well, didn't he?
Yeah, actually watching the longer highlights from the club's Portadown highlights for the other stand makes the goal look a lot better. Actually, really, really nice finish. He had a fair amount to do. Like that's a team that needs a bit of inspiration up top, and 2 wins from 5. They've had to play. They got an absolute spanking at Larne. That's a really good response from them. What's their expectation? Yep. I think people are looking at it now that we could have a bottom 3 or 4 of Bangor, Portadown, Glenavon, and Dungannon. But there's a chance here for one of these teams to move on. But I know I'm the low man on Crusaders based on what I predicted pre-season. They've only played 4 games, not 5, like a lot of other teams. But losing in the manner they did to Carrick, they've lost to Portadown away from home, who is going to be a rival in the lower middle class of the league. They lose to Glentoran, that's understandable in the circumstances. They'll come and go. Portadown would probably be in the same boat there in regards to losing to a Glentoran team who maybe didn't overrun them at home, and they'll feel as though they should have got a draw, but they are left empty-handed. Crews kind of need to get a few results themselves because they're very inexperienced, and bar flashes of quality, the only thing they've beaten is Bangor, and Bangor also had 2 penalties saved. So that could have went very wrongly for them. A bit like Dungannon, you worry about what they have at the back. Now, Crusaders have brought in a new young player in from Scotland to try and shore things up, so we'll have to see if he's going to do something. Evan Easton. This is a team in transition. A lot of these players are signed rather than loaned in. Maybe they've learnt a bit of their lesson from the Kieran Alford situation there, and there is bright sparks. But bright sparks in a team that leaks goals, it isn't going to mean much. And I don't think the fans, well, no fans in this league wants to be stuck in a relegation dogfight. But it's with the likes of Carrick doing well and, Bangor getting points on the table, it all starts to feel as though that's where they could be sitting until they do get a big run under their belts.
Yeah, it's
which we saw last year they can do.
They can do, and I mean, Declan Fidel knows the club inside and out. I think the biggest challenge is, well, he knows the club inside and out. A lot of the players that they brought in don't know the Irish League inside and out. I think they have made quite a lot of outside the league signings, which in one sense is quite exciting. It's good to see new players coming in, but on the other sense, it does take a while, like anything else, like any new signing, to acclimate to a league, and the style of it, the physicality that maybe the Irish League has compared to maybe some of the more technically focused leagues. But again, like, you could throw a blanket over, as you say, a number of these sides that are currently occupying the bottom six in terms of the consistency is going to be an issue. I mean, if you take from Portadown for a second, I actually thought two really good goals, but there were two sort of like, beautiful ball out of defence / midfield for Port's first, and as you say, recently, a really, really smart finish. The second goal to me, and there was about 4 Route 1 get it done goals scored over the weekend, but this was like the pick of the bunch.
Portadown are probably one of the more Route 1 sides in the league, completely. You'd argue.
But it was like the best bits, especially in the BBC highlights. It was the Aaron McCarry show for about 5 seconds. One, he does the best TV camera save you're going to find out this season when he tips the ball over the bar. It was fantastic. And then the Portadown winner, I think, involves some of the best things you could see. Huge kick out from the keeper, from the goal kick, flick on header, shot, save, gas from the crowd, rebound, flies in for an 89th minute winner. Again, for Portadown, it's a massive victory, having lost, I think, the previous two matches at home. But for Crusaders, I personally don't think Crusaders are going to get relegated this season. I don't think Crusaders will be in a relegation fight this season. But I do feel that they will have, another season of maybe mid-table mediocrity, because I think that's just how it's going to be. They will lose. They will win a couple of games, then they might go on a 4 or 5 game winless run to turn around and win a couple of more games. They will do enough against the teams that they have to beat. But for Portadown, that was a massive, massive, massive victory on Friday night. I don't think that can be understated, because unlucky, I suppose, to lose to the Glens in the first game of the season, but then to lose to Ballymena United at home would have been a sucker punch. And you do not want those games kicking on. So if you look at the table now, Portadown are sat in 7th, 6 points, just behind Linfield, just above Bangor. The table is probably quite kind to them. But again, going to Larne, I don't think, and getting smashed isn't something that's going to, I think, deter Niall Curry too much, because he knows that's what will happen with the Ports. And again, UKEC hasn't really kicked the season off the level that you would like him to. Who hasn't done it either. McCartan hasn't done it either. So there's been a few things that really haven't gone as well as the Ports would like. But I think sitting here, having beaten Dungannon away from home and beaten Crusaders at home, especially with the next 2 games coming up quite tricky, I think the Ports will take that.
Well, they're teams that look like they're going to be around them, and it gives them a nice little buffer, as we said, of teams like particularly Glenavon and Dungannon there. So but what we will now see is that, yes, they played against Glentoran and Larne, but they'll now have to take on Linfield and Coleraine down the line, as well as the likes of Cliftonville. So again, we're talking about a lot of teams where, as you said, put a blanket over them. A lot of the sides right now have massive red flags.
Yeah.
And it's more just what are the red flags that you pay most attention to, and who has somewhat viable outs of these red flags. Here's a question: a ground there's plenty of red flags on a Friday night, and they're using these Friday nights to their advantage. It seems, even from building up a bit of momentum from fans, from home support, from routine. Like, are Larne still good? Looks like it. Beating a tricky opposition in Ballymena United in the Slemish skirmish.
Yeah, I know you're holding on to that one, and I think, listen, go for it, go for it. I love that. I honestly, I made a note here prior to coming on this afternoon with you. I think Larne will go about their business in a very measured, um, perhaps unspectacular, but very measured and understated way this season. Um, yes, there is clearly something going on off the field for them. You know, there's issues with obviously the this managerial appointment that goes back to the Kenny Bruce era. The fact that the Kenny Bruce era is now over and the new owners have come in, there is undoubtedly going to be uncertainty because there's people aren't aware of who these new owners are and what their ultimate intent is. Um, but Lauren showed in Europe that they are, at least on the pitch, not just a very well organized team. I actually think they're a very resilient team. I think they've got a high degree of work ethic. I think to go away to Latvia and Kosovo, heat conditions, lack of game time under their belts, and they performed really well. They showed nerves of steel to get through two penalty shootout victories and then to go to Portugal and get a 0-0 granted after a 3-0 defeat at home. Um, I was slightly concerned based on the European form and the lack of goals, especially at home. Would they have the capabilities without Andy Ryan in the side at the moment? And Benji McGee hasn't probably had the best start to his Lauren career. Would they be able to kick on? But I think they've laid down a bit of a marker. Like they are going to mean business this season, and I think I would agree with what you and the chat said. They'll probably be in the top two or three, undoubtedly.
Comparing them to Linfield, when you look at that Linfield side, you don't see little buds of potential if they can grow into something that maybe is more dynamic to take on somebody else. You look at Lorne, and maybe it's just my, teenage football manager brain on me, but
Okay.
they start with Benji McGee, Lusty, and
Yeah.
O'Connor. That's so
Yeah.
fun and exciting. And yes, these players might ultimately have a ceiling that maybe even pales in comparison to some players like Offer or whatever. But you grow, you develop. There's every Lauren fan will hope that is like they're all mini Andy Ryans because they can all drive with the
Yeah.
ball, they can all take on someone, they can all pass, and they've all got an eye for goal. All three of them on. Here we go. The question is, if these results continue and Gary Haven is the man that they decide to go, this is working out, we go for
Mm.
him, would that be seen as a less ambitious decision by the Lauren
Mm.
hierarchy?
That makes a very, very good question. Um, I think it is a really good question. I would probably say yes. I think he is a brilliant person to have in the club.
Like, do you really need to have someone with a Scottish accent, for example, to all of a sudden be, I know football because I came from somewhere else?
No, and again, it's a really good point. But what young or what Northern Irish coach or coach with Irish league experience would you say is out there at the moment that could be best placed for it? Potentially Oren Kearney. Would he be a better choice of the Gary Hebron? Will Oren Kearney even want to take on a full time job? I don't know if he's still teaching or whatever the situation is with that.
They're
Um,
definitely a club, and maybe this is just a wrong view on how uh, the Lynch duo worked, but they do seem to be a system team.
well, I think they are. You look at Lynch and Jimmy Lynch, what they did at Lauren and how they went through things, even from the recruitment. Like, there was a real purposefulness about what they were doing. And that's one thing I've always liked about Lauren, certainly since they've come up to the Premiership, is there's been a purpose and a clear direction and strategy for how they're doing things. And I think having Gary Hebron there offers him a form of consistency. And I do agree with you. I don't think you need an English or Scottish accent to necessarily bring success. And again, I would like to know when the last English or Scottish manager to ever win a trophy in the Irish League, let alone be dominant is. Um, but I do think that Larne, for me, perhaps need a coach who has operated in a full time environment, has operated in a very professional, high performing environment, and I just don't know if you're going to get that in the Irish League. Perhaps they say Gary Haveron, you give it to him for the season. And I thought about this. How wise were they to make the decision that they made? But in many ways, when was a good time to do it? You can't say, oh, well, just why did you not do it at the start of the season? Well, because they were preparing for Europe. And why did you not do it at the end of last season? Well, the takeover hadn't been completed. So in many ways, when was the right time to change coaches? Well, there's never an ideal time. But yeah, I think everyone knows the club. He knows the players, which is important. And I think as this transition period, like losing Sean Want, I thought was a big blow. Bolger out for the guts of the season is a big blow. Andy Ryan out indefinitely. Whether a couple of injury and will he leave the club? That's obviously been speculated. That's a big blow. Those are three massive, massive players, and that's why I think the likes of Randall, he's been a lot more game time. If you notice, both in Europe and domestically, he's in and he's making it tick. He led them. Led them well. But yeah, I think Larne are going about the business in the right way. For Ballymena United, they've recruited arguably as good as any club in the Irish League. Over the last sort of 18 months, they're going to be disappointed. Though I don't think they'd be massively surprised. But Larne hit them early. I really liked their first goal. It was direct, it was quick, and it cut Ballymena open. And then the second goal, I thought was a fantastic strike, personally speaking. But yeah, United made a good start to the season. Larne made a good start to the season, and I think it's going to be that's what you want. Two well-supported clubs, and as I say, I think Jim Irwin is going to do something well at Ballymena United, but I think he also has to because they've spent a lot of cash.
This does not feel like a panic stations moment. It can be seen as maybe Ballymena aren't the kind of swashbuckling side near the top of the table here to threaten all the big boys that maybe their form could indicate they could be. This was their real test, and I wouldn't say they failed because they concede an early enough goal in the first 10 minutes and then they concede one later on. They miss a penalty, but I mean, but then Ferguson, eats up penalties for breakfast these days, so it's really not that much of a punishment against Larne the way these things are going. So here, look, I know there'll be Ballymena fans who were probably saying, maybe if this didn't happen or that didn't happen, we've all seen games and then you've heard someone like me talk about it and you're like, you didn't see what happened in the 40th minute. So I get it. It's not the shellacking which Portadown got the weekend before there. So this is
the highlights it could have been, by the way. McKenry hit the crossbar. They've had Sean O'Neill made a really good save. Larne, again, we're going to assault on highlights again if you're not there, but like Larne seemed to have gone about their business in a pretty efficient manner, I thought, on Friday. A hell of a second goal to win it too.
Yeah, I just think it further establishes that Larne are absolutely no pushovers. They're not a club, at least from a squad point of view, that are without a paddle here. They've got a lot of nice young talent. They've got a lot of experienced players. And as well as that, they've got players who are willing to pull up their sleeves and really work here to do well. And I it's easy to say and it's hard to say as well, but they can really be dark horses in the cup this year because that they have these fruitful attacking players. It could be a big season for McKendry, and I wonder do they just keep up this new shape and are teams able to deal with, if you were to say who is the best technical team on the ball, it's probably Coleraine, but you'd have to say based on what we've actually seen, it's Larne. So that will definitely win you more games in this league than lose. So I think they face some tough tests, and outside of that Coleraine loss, they're ticking over all right. Yeah, they've been missed penalties and red cards along the way. They definitely feel as though they've left some points on the table. But when you're going up against a difficult Ballymena side, I think they should be feeling pretty good about themselves. Looking at some of these transfers that have been floating around on this day, which is the final day of the transfer window, no no Isaacs, but I mean, we talked about it there. Brandon Birmingham moving on to what's loan technically to Cliftonville. Again, winger slash
Yeah.
attacker. I think it gives them his size and stature, which I think is important. I think it just gives them another option rather than a complete blowaway player there. With that, you'd think, well, Dungannon are struggling for bodies. They add something a wee bit different. Junior's back in the league,
Yes.
and he's going to be wearing a Swift stop.
Saw that. Again, I'm really surprised that, you know, he did okay at Glentoran. Yeah, I think he scored like 11, 12 goals in about 40 odd games before he went to Galway United, but didn't seem to do much there. And as I say, him coming back, I think it's a good move. See, PSG is signed for Bangor. Patrick Solis Grogan is signed again I think he's actually signed as in full time, not as a loan signing. But yeah,
Dean has experience, but I don't think that's a nailed on spot for him. And of course, if we're staying with Bangor, Ferguson isn't going to be a top flight striker once again. He's now wedded on Della. Is that a strange move, or sometimes that's the type of moves you have to make, where if a player isn't starting and wants to start, it's not worth having them around.
yeah, it's a bit disappointing because I always felt like, again, I'm trying to remember. He's been at what the has he been at Dundela, the Welders, and Bangor all in the championship, and scored goals, I think, wherever he has been at that level.
Mm-hmm.
And I was disappointed. I really wanted to see what he could do in the Irish Premiership. I've never really seen him, have a full blown season there. Certainly in the last number of years. But perhaps, to your point, he's comfortable at the Championship. That's where he think he can thrive and wants to play. But yeah, again, looking at I was thought you were going to ask me to bring my yellow tie today and how much the Jim White for Irish League transfer deadline day. But it's been
it's getting better. To be fair, it's usually random loan players.
Yeah, but I was actually surprised not to see more from the likes of Linfield. It really was because, as you say, they're not short of money. They've had nearly 1.2, 1.3 million would come in due to the European run, so they're not short of cash. It just seems that they don't want to spend it.
Well, again, you keep hearing managers talk about there not being the same kind of value in the league. I don't really know what that means. I think overall experience in the league is what's successful. Everybody wants to get a bargain, but of course they do. But oftentimes money is spent on players that don't bring home the bacon, trying to moneyball it out a wee bit. But of course, if you can find bargains, you want it. You want to try and smartly spend what for a lot of clubs is a limited dosh. Isaac Bird seemed to be the quickest transfer saga going in the end. We referenced it last week. Didn't expect him to be at Linfield. For a player who probably wasn't that happy that he wasn't starting week in and week out at Glenavon, he's not going to start at Linfield. But maybe that's okay because it's full time and he can help push on and improve to be a player. He's someone which I love the stature of. He reminds me a lot of Tim Mountsie with a bigger engine. But then I think I compare every tall midfield player to Tim Mountsie. Bit leggy. But Linfield going back to let's build up some of the better younger talent in the league. So, I think they were saying at whatever age he is, 2021, he's got like the guts of 100 or more appearances in the league. That's very rare. So, you'd like to think, or at least he'll like to think, he'll push on. The big mega signing for Cliftonville hasn't come as their whole situation around the takeover continues to drag and cause drama, and until we know something for sure, we'll just have to wait and see. And
is that this week or next week? They've got I think it's a meeting of the board shareholders to talk about it. But you're talking, that's a really good point though. You bring up about Cliftonville because like Jim Magilton has done such an amazing job since he's been there. Irish Cup, League Cup, Irish Cup final, back-to-back European qualification. And in that time, he has lost striker after striker after striker after exciting new player. And Kearney left on the eve of the European games, which seems, you don't want to stand in the player's way, sure, but the club is bigger than any one player, and that seems like a very strange decision to have made on the eve of a game where the club could have made 250,000, or a tie where you could make €250,000. Um, but he needs to be backed, because the problem is Joe Gormley is now in the second season on, from the thoughts that he was going to retire. They thought he was going to retire 2 years ago, and he didn't. And then he had an unbelievable season last year. But a man in his mid-30s with all the miles and games and everything he's done, and like, he will score goals, absolutely. But you cannot be reliant on him. Ryan Kern is an injury-prone, fantastic striker, but he's injury-prone. Eric McWood, again, fast, sharp, but again, is he going to score 20-odd goals in a season? It's a lot of pressure on Hale again to drag Cliftonville kicking and screaming, which he invariably will do. But I would say Jimmy Gilton's as good as any manager in the Irish League, and I think he's demonstrated that. But you got to back him.
There's been other deals that have popped through over the past while. A couple of people left Larne, with Isaac Bear going to Linfield. In comes Josh Key to kind of take his place in that Glenavon squad. We see Oisin Devlin go to Bangor to kind of shore that up. We see a player coming in from the League of Ireland, another attacking player for Glenavon. Bosakani, I'm going to go for there. I mean, I love this. MJ Campson Kamara, love that. Lincoln, the Glentoran, 19-year-old. It's a loan signing from Lincoln City. Sometimes these players do wonderful things, or we never hear of them ever, and they're going back to England, so we'll have to sit tight.
Yeah.
Another one here, coming from Lincoln, 18-year-old American forward Zane Okoro to Coleraine. I mean, do not have enough strikers. Perhaps the one move I'm surprised that we haven't seen, and maybe things will move, is that in the end, Larne have kept all their strikers. Nathaniel Ferris is in there to fight first place at Glentoran, and McGonigal is stayed at Coleraine. Recent did move in the end, and we might see others late. Lewis Francis is back at a Bangor, which gives them kind of a young player who they had like previously. Matthew Orr obviously is a loss for Linfield, but that was to be expected, was it not? Maybe next year. Yeah. It probably was expected this year, and they were able to keep him around for the European games. So, what would you say then is the biggest transfer of the season, of the summer? I know it's technically Cooper, but that felt it was like such a January move. You're not allowed to say it.
I mean, Glenn's getting open. I think from Derry is probably a big move in terms of his exploits of what he's done. If he could do like a quarter of what Shields has done for Linfield, they would say that's been an absolutely brilliant investment. I actually think for a club like Portadown getting Reece, it's actually a massive move, because there's a young player, something to prove. And Portadown need those options, because I don't think up front UK is as consistent as the Ports would need them to be. It's a difficult one. I mean, your man Bentley's come in for Larne. I think it's seems to be settling in well. Took his goal well on Friday night. I actually thought Darrell O'Connor going to Ballymena United was a great signing on paper. I think he was a really, really good player. I'm really surprised he didn't go back to the Glens, and I'm actually very surprised he didn't go to any of the full-time Irish League clubs. In many ways, you look at some of the players that Ballymena United have. I mean, how many other clubs would want some of those players? You think of Ben Kennedy, obviously, and O'Connor. Like they're really good players. So on paper, I would think those. I always try to hold my judgment on them until probably Halloween to see who's actually fitted in. But yeah, it's a difficult one. Kieran Upper, he was spotted in January, and he's proven, I think, with his European exploits, that brilliant goal against the Faroese club. Vikingur was an unbelievable strike. He proved his weight in goal for Linfield, and in many ways, getting through that European tie in particular, especially after losing 2-1 away from home, he's repaid his transfer fee and then some. Though granted, he was a January sign. So yeah, I mean, it's been like Cooper is the biggest one of the summer. He absolutely is. But there's like three or four other ones there I think have stood out for me. It will be interesting to see, as you say, some of the Carrick signings, like bringing in some of those old school Irish League players' experience.
I like
He
Lecky.
is he was very unlucky. Did he not miss
He's just
last season with injury, or was it the
he's a
season before?
yeah, and it just gives you something
Yep.
different, like in the air, and obviously he's very good with his feet. I'm not saying that he is the best signing of the summer, but when you're a team like that, if they can just keep him on the pitch, he is just he always gives you something to get out with. It's not very complicated. He actually can link up with the two speedy boys either side, maybe a Macalitis coming off the
What?
bench. So
Yeah,
that's the one I think every other team in that area of the pitch. Obviously there was a deep connection between Lecky and
yeah.
Baxter previously, but I would imagine there's plenty of teams throughout this league kicking themselves going,
I
should
do
maybe
think it's
push
all
for that.
relative to your point though. Like the signing, like on paper, is what does each club really need? Um, and that is a really good point because you look at it and think to yourself, well, Carrick, if Lecky can come in and score between 5 and 10 goals, but those 5 and 10 goals either get them into the top six or get them well clear of relegation, well, then that's exactly what they needed. Um, you look at Alarn, you look at Linfield, you look at the Glentoran, and I suppose Coleraine this season. The signings they're making, the expectation is, well, what are you going to do that's going to help get us silverware or help make us challenge for the title? And that's where I think the relevance factor kicks in. But I'm looking at Clifton and thinking, I don't think there's a standout signing there that's going to make or break their season. I don't think there's one for Glenavon right now. I don't think there's any for Crusaders because I think so many of them are unknown. So there's a few clubs I think, well, their business is probably just almost summer's just passed them by.
Yeah, I like the potential of the cruise ones, but it won't really mean much if you're the player that scored 11 goals, but
Yeah,
your team's 10th. So, yeah, hey, this season is definitely half cooked at the minute. I know early seasons often are, but this season's very, very
yeah.
different.
Well, I think this is the thing. It isn't. We'll see what happens. I think over the next coming weeks. And there's obviously there's going to be players out there who are free. So the free transfer window I don't think is closed. So we'll see. But it's I mean Jack Scott, didn't he go on loan to Carrick from
Mhm.
Coleraine as well? So yeah, we'll see what happens. But I was actually surprised. The only one I was very surprised about the no club in the Premiership was it Ethan Devine's left Linfield. He's gone back to the Championship. Yeah. So
Yes,
again, I
he's
was
with the
quite surprised
Welders.
by that because I think he could have been um someone that I thought could have been actually a really good signing, showed a lot of promise. But yeah, we'll see what happens. But yeah, no, it's been a really like the summer is now officially over. I think as we enter into September. But it's been certainly an interesting one in the Irish League with that, but also as we start this campaign. It's actually a really good thing, I think, that Glentoran have started well because I think it adds that bit of spice to it, especially with the big two game coming up. Is it next weekend or the following weekend? And that's what you want. You want someone setting the pace early on because it's going to mean the likes of Linfield, Larne, Coleraine are going to have to chase, and I find that quite exciting.
That progressive changing strand of your body is just shaking right now because I have 6 games, 3 o'clock on a Saturday. What is this? 2009?
Yeah, I saw that. I was laughing to myself. I was like, "What? There must be a typo here. There has to be a typo."
I totally agree. I'm like, what is going on here? What's this happen? Everyone has accidentally forget to change their game.
Yeah, I did. I did enjoy that. But the purists, listen, the purists out there, they've got what they wanted. All 6 matches on Sports Sound.
Wow, that'll be a busy day. I'll be keeping it short if I get a gig this Saturday. Um, you know what? We'll probably start at Windsor. Linfield aim to bounce back, but they'll have to face off against a team in red with white socks on in Portadown. Can they anger them like a bull to try and counteract this rather meaty and revenge-seeking team? It's weird to say this early on. Actually, being without a net for Portadown's probably going to be a big blow for them, just because it just removes an extra, player to rotate for them in, because they've just got so few bodies that can really impact the game up top. I don't think we need to confuse this too much. I think if Portadown can keep it 0-0 after 30 minutes, that's the achievement here. But I think overall, you've seen that pretty much every team they've played against has had a bit of joy against them at the back, especially if this three at the back continues. I don't think it's going to be hammering, but I think it'll be maybe a 3-0.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on a few factors. I think even if Portadown keep it 0-0 in the first 20-25 minutes, even if it's 0-0 at half time, Linfield have capabilities of scoring two or three within quick succession. I think, again, going away to Linfield is a gimme for a lot of clubs, because you're a hiding to nothing. But I wrote down 2-0 Linfield, a very routine performance where Portadown will huff and puff, but probably not leave much of a glove on the Blues. But that's what I'm thinking, 2-0 Linfield.
Game that stands out to me here, Glenavon and Dungannon. We talked about it earlier
Oh, yeah.
on. I mean, we've done all the preamble. Let's go straight to the score. Do you feel confident either way? I think it's 1-1. These games are usually tetchy. They're usually
They are terrible.
defined by a mistake.
Yeah, well, they've conceded 23 goals between them in 10 league matches. I can't see how that's going to
Are you not
um,
entertained?
just so. I understand. I think there's very little between the two sides at this moment. I do, though. You would think Dungannon are invariably a better side. Um, I think with Francie out, because I'm assuming if they're appealing as a suspension, you can't play in two matches, can you? Or is that just roll on indefinitely? Because I think that'll make a big difference. But my view is probably going to be 2-1 Dungannon.
Bold. I just can't see a winner there. Whoever does, if there is a winner, excellent. Like I said, a loser there. Ooh, ouch. Especially if a team like Crusaders are able to get a result, but it seems unlikely because they're going up against a freshly rested Coleraine. Will they heap a whole load of misery, a tiny bit of misery, or are you maybe penciling in a shock here? Like, you potentially have the most potent attack going to the leakiest defence.
I want a really good title race this season in the Irish League. We were starved of it last year, and I absolutely was enthralled 2 seasons ago. So with that end, I'm thinking, well, who is going to be more likely to be challenging for the Gibson Cup? Is it Crusaders or is it Coleraine? And the answer is Coleraine. I think Coleraine need to be winning these sort of matches, because these are the sort of games that Linfield have won in the past when they win the league against probably even a superior Crusaders side. I think Coleraine will just have too much for them. I think it's another 2-1 away victory for me.
No, I think it'll. I'll go 3-0 again, very similar to before. 3-0 Coleraine. I don't want to predict anything more bruising than that, but I think Coleraine have the players to pass it around. They'll be patient. They're used to a surface like it's down there at Seaview, especially after that loss to Portadown. This week, as the first month of the season comes to an end, things could get less sunny over there in North Belfast, which is where we're not going to stay, because Carrick actually host Cliftonville. I mean, can Cliftonville break down this team? I think the answer is yes, but maybe this is a bit boring. I'm going to go 0-0. I think they're not going to be able to squeeze past Cliftonville, but also I don't think Cliftonville, as much as actually Cliftonville were picking up nice positions, like if Cliftonville can just squeeze a little bit of space around the box, which it looks as though Carrick do give that space away. It looks as though they have the dead ball accuracy in players from Wilson or Gormley, where pass, they tee it up like a golf shot, or like a drop goal almost, except you want to keep it under the bar. I can see maybe Cliftonville get goals from there, but I think this game could drift away from both
Yeah,
sides, and yeah, I'll go for a goal stalemate.
interesting. Okay, like I think this is again is a really interesting tussle because it's two sides. Um, one will go into sorry, two sides will go into this game, I think, with a bit of confidence. For first of all, having secured the first league victory of the season against Glenavon and the manner that they did it, and Carrick, who've just they're one of four unbeaten sides. Therefore, for me, that's where there's a potential stalemate on the cards. And I actually think, in reality, like who is happier with their squad right now, and who actually probably has a better squad right now. I think that's up for debate. Um, I think it's probably going to be a 1-1.
Fair, fair. Not a high scoring game. I don't think it will be. Bangor Larn might be a high score, but perhaps not for the right reasons for Bangor. Can the Inver Vampires shake it off and do it in daylight?
Very good. I think yes, that they can, they have, and they will. Um, I think again, this is going to be an interesting tussle. I think Bangor again, they've got two victories under the belt so far this season. Would you say that they're probably that's more than what they had expected? It's certainly that they've been very very pleased to have two home wins in particular under the belt. I just think Larne are a different beast, and I think Larne have a professionalism about them that I think they have maybe not come up against yet so far this season, and I think Larne are just going to be too good for them. And for me, because I think there's the County Antrim Shield games before it, Larne will obviously make a lot of changes. But I don't know. I think Larne will go there. I think they'll put on a bit of a show, and I think they'll probably run like 3-0 victories. 3-0 victors, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to go for the 2-0 for Larne, but I do think that Bangor backline is there for the taking, and they will do their bits against the McClanded boy. Potentially another nice win for Larne, building up their own bit of momentum. But Ballymena, Glentoran, up at the showgrounds. I know I've been very much the high man on probably both these teams, but I think this is going to be a tricky affair. I think this is where all the entertainment's going to be on Saturday. This screams drama, penalties, red cards. I'm going to go 2-1 Ballymena.
2-1 Ballymena. That's an interesting shout. I remember a few years ago, the Dutch winger Vander, what his second name was, for Glentoran. He scored a late winner, and I remember Colin Pepper, Connor Pepper at the time running over, and the crowd went absolutely crazy. For me, there's something whenever the big two clubs go to Ballymena United. I love the stadium. I love how just the way it's the style of it, and there'll be a big crowd there, which I think will add to a lot of the occasion to it. That being said, I just think Glentoran have momentum now. Again, they've gone to Crusaders, which is a tricky game, but again, to your point earlier, I think they would be expected to pick up points against the other clubs that they've picked up points against this season. If they want to win the title, if they want to be challenging, similar to what I mentioned earlier about going to, for Coleraine, going to Crusaders needed a result, I think the Glens will need that here at Ballymena United. And again, I think they will do it, and I think they're going to win 1-0.
Fair enough. Let's see how it all pans out. Look, one thing where people can find you, where you're not talking about Irish League football, you're talking about football. Of the boys that were the green of Northern Ireland. Couple of games this weekend. We'll not dive into too much. But yourself, how are you feeling about it? There's no goalkeepers seemingly, and some of the main boys are out. I mean, Luxembourg's one of those games where it's not a scary game, but it's definitely a must win, which I think could be frustrating if they're going to struggle to get goals. They look. There's some things to get excited about with this Northern Ireland team, but also you worry that they maybe aren't ever going to get across the line in a serious kind of way.
When you say that, they're going to get scared about Luxembourg. I'm terrified. And I'm going to have the good fortune to be able to go to the matches with my dad. So I'm flying over for the Luxembourg game and then making my way to Germany. So you're very, very excited. It's good to actually, from an Irish League perspective, like so many of the squad now have got Irish League pedigree, and I think actually in many ways it's a brilliant thing for the Irish League to be able to showcase the fact that, and I wish the IFA did more with this. I really do, from a marketing perspective. The Irish League matches should be highlighted in the programs, etc., because that is the breeding ground for so many of our men's internationals, and obviously it's the backbone of our women's international team. But yeah, look, I actually think an ex-Irish League player is going to be leading the line. I think Hale's going to start against Luxembourg. I think another ex-Irish League player is going to be our captain. I think Trey Hume will have the captain's armband, and I really hope both of them will be celebrating on Thursday night. I think we need to beat Luxembourg, and I think we will beat Luxembourg. And then against Germany.
Do you expect Hume to be the long-term captain now?
It's a good question. I think we've got 4 people to choose from. I think you've got Hume, you've got Ballard, you've got Bradley, and you've got Shea Charles. I think the reality is, and this is, I say this with the hope that I'm proved wrong, unfortunately, the Bs, the Ballards, and the Bradleys are probably too injury prone. And I think that Shea Charles, I would rather just him concentrating his. I like Shea Charles in midfield doing it. I think a centre midfield, a 6 or an 8, wearing the captain's armband is probably the best choice if I can make one. That being said, Trey Hume is just absolutely, he's filthy in the best possible way on the football field. He's just so hard, he's so robust, he's so durable. And I as an Irish League fan, I love the fact that it's an ex-Irish League player that could be captain in our country, hopefully for the foreseeable. So Hume or Bradley would probably be my ideal shouts, but I think Hume's going to get it just purely on the durability aspect.
Yeah, there's something about Hume where he kind of ticks a lot of the boxes in the sense of he has that doggedness, he has that humility, he's clearly a great communicator.
Yeah.
Bradley's the best player, Ballard's probably the best leader, and yeah, as you said, Charles has that ability to be one of the best players in the squad, but doesn't seem to have just that total energy about him just yet. So maybe they kind of all are part of the crew, but you can see him taking it on. It's clear we have a generation, and you hope they can grow together, and we're not sitting there when they're all 29 going, oh, well, hopefully.
If only.
Yeah, if only. But there's still, there's younger ones that you're going to hope can push through, really, aren't you? We're still waiting for potentially the Braden Grahams and Patrick Kellys and the likes to maybe.
It's a good, listen, and you look too, the underage teams now, I think are good. They get far better coverage than they used to. And again, there's a really good pathway for Irish League players. And again, there's a good backbone of Irish League players from the 17s, 19s, 21s. And there are some really good, exciting talent coming through. I think the under 21s in particular and 19s, I try to keep a close eye on. So yeah, it'll be, I think it's going to be a big 2 years coming up for Michael and the lads. And yeah, keeping very optimistic.
Stu, it's been a delight to chat to you, as it always is. A passionate man who is passionate about all things football from this isle. I'm sure many people are already following you online, but how can they do that if they are not?
Yeah, I think it's Irish Will on Twitter. I will I'll respond to you when you post it up. But yeah, it's just Irish League chat, and I think the community of people actually talk about the Irish League. There's some, the around the ground guys are fantastic, and there's a couple of really good Irish League focused pages on X and Twitter. So it's it's great. It's a really good place to actually just, I think, hear people's views and get people's opinions on it. So yeah, I do enjoy it.
Stu, thank you once again. Until next time, I'll chat to you soon. And there we have it, another big week. If you happen to be new here and you don't follow the podcast, now is a great time to do that. Follow us on all our social media pages. That's Instagram, Facebook, as well as TikTok. You can also follow us on X. It's Kicking Match on all of them. Just search it, Kicking Match an Irish League podcast, you'll find the wonderful red diamond or the wonderful red little shamrocky thing. You're already listening to this in some sort of podcasting platform. And if you're not a subscriber or follower, highly recommend it. It's free, it's easy, and once you do it, you get a little notification on some of the players. Just look for the little dots, click on it, boom, and if it put it up early, put it up late, it comes straight to your phone rather than check it all the time. But thank you for listening. This time round, I'll be with you at the same time next week. Hope you keep well. Bye-bye.